Okay, we're live. We got Dr. Marc Lewis from the Texans, and this is one of my favorite people in the industry. I actually read your entire thesis a few times, and the reason why I read it is because I got hired to consult with the University of Arizona, and at the time there was not like a real sports science role, and I didn't really know what I was doing. So I read that, and I had a pretty good framework from that. So I appreciate you putting that out there and letting me read that. But yeah, it's good to have you on.
I appreciate it, Les. It's good to be here. And likewise, I mean, all of our conversations, I've learned a lot from you. I always enjoy our conversations, kind of the iron sharpens iron mentality. I have a lot of respect for you and the work, and you always, our conversations, anytime we speak, always sharpens me up. So I appreciate it.
No, thank you, man. Well, I didn't send this to you beforehand, but I did want to know kind of like how you, like your journey to where you're at now, just a little bit. And, I think it's a really cool story. So I wanted, just to tell that story a little bit and people have context to who you are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think your background and your previous experiences in your personal life shape who you are. And I think really do influence your professional career, influence your position and how you view things. So a little bit about me, my background when I was growing up, didn't know my father. My mother abandoned me when I was young. So in and out of temporary custody situations, temporary care, foster home for a bit, a group home for a bit. I was emancipated as soon as I turned 16. Actually only made it through formal education to 8th grade. Didn't go to high school. Lived in HUD housing, so income-based housing. The military was my way out. So as soon as I turned 17, I didn't need a parent's signature because I was emancipated. I joined the military. Did not know what I was getting into, signed up for what paid the highest signing bonus and had the lowest requisite education, which was infantry. I went in just ground pounder. We had just entered wartime with the 9/11 attacks and then the invasion of Baghdad in 2003. And so, that was premium in terms of, money. And then also just in terms of, for me, hearing the recruiter talk about it, being able to have your life mean something, being able to, if something were to happen, if I were to die, like my life would mean something. Because before then, I think for me, it was really on, if I died tomorrow, would it really even matter to anyone? Would it even, be on the radar or anyone's radar? So I think, for me, that was very meaningful with that, is the thought of being able to do that. So, joined the military and was able to do a lot in the military, because right out of boot camp, man, I was just so thankful. Like going in, it was like, I got health insurance, I got a roof over my head, I got food, I got gym, like I got all this stuff, and, that I wasn't used to, having stability. And so I really, enjoyed boot camp. And because of that, I got opportunities opened up to go to airborne school, aerosol school, do some of these other things right out of boot camp that otherwise I wouldn't have been able to do. So, really transitioning through the military, I got stability. I was really connected to a lot of people, like older brothers. I got to a great unit that had folks that were able to give me life advice, brotherly advice, kind of fill a little bit of that role that I didn't really have with a father figure. So, on one of our deployments, I was able to get access to some, basic exercise physiology, anatomy books. I loved training, running, lifting weights, just everything training within the framework of what we had to do in physical preparation in the military. But I knew zero about the human body. I was just kind of figuring it out myself. And then I got turned on to some of these textbooks because someone in our unit, major in the unit, actually, he did his undergrad in exercise science before going to grad school, getting an MBA, things like that. So he's like, I think you find this interesting. So I started reading those books. I started absorbing everything I could on physiology, biomechanics. Basically, if it was about training the human body, I was going to read it. So I was just soaking all of it up. Some of it I didn't understand. Other parts I was figuring out and experimenting within my own training, trying to understand and connect the dots. And so when I got out of the military, transitioning to go to school, I knew I wanted to study exercise science, but I had no idea what that meant in terms of a career, anything like that. I knew I loved performance broadly, and I knew that I was very interested in kind of the intersection between research, being able to answer questions using data, and training. And so I go into undergrad, and I was kind of figuring it out. So I started at West Virginia University. I treated it like a job. I went in there every day, backpack on with all my books for all the classes I had. Even if I didn't have that day, I treated it like a job. I was on campus from 8:00 in the morning after I did PT and ate breakfast. I was in campus from 8 to 5 every day. I was in a library in between classes. So I did really well, in spite of the no high school GED background. And because of that, I did really well academically, and some of the faculty took notice. So I came across a professor named Dr. Jean McCory, and she could tell I had a different background and things. And so she talked to me, she asked questions, and basically she opened up my eyes to, hey, if you want some opportunities, you also can go to a school that maybe helps support undergraduate research. You can get involved in different ways. And so she actually encouraged me to go to a different university. So I ended up applying to a couple of schools, Duke, UVA, Wake Forest, and I kind of narrowed it down and to Duke or Wake Forest, and ended up going to Wake Forest and being able to have full scholarship and then do my honors research there under Dr. Mike Berry. And it was there that I really was able to put one foot in research and understand research methodology, statistics, basic physiology, and be connected from the understanding of how to systematically answer questions and how to ask the right questions and how to use that information and interpret that information in terms of biological systems. Meanwhile, I was personal training. I was strength conditioning intern. Anyway, anytime I had outside of the classroom, I was basically in the trenches. I was training people. I was learning. I was training 60-year-old women. I was training 14-year-old high school athletes. I was, training student athletes at Wake Forest. Just anyone I could train, I was doing it. So I think that was really the time in my life where I was putting together. I was doing both, and I was like, these are going to intersect. I just don't know how right now in terms of a career. And so at the time, this is 2012, 2013, applied sports science positions really weren't that big of a thing. At least I wasn't aware of folks that had my type of role. Right. There was very, very few. And so with that, I didn't really see that role or see what I would do from a work standpoint. And so fast forward a little bit, and doing my master's at the University of South Carolina, I had an opportunity to do a sport physiology, strength conditioning fellowship at US Ski and Snowboard in Park City, Utah. And that was really where I got introduced to what a high performance environment looks like, where you've got, Bill Sands was there at the time. You've got Bill Sands, one of the pioneers in American sport physiology. You've got excellent strength coaches. You've got dietitians, sports psychologists, all under the same roof, and all looking at different ways and collaborating, truly integrating their information to help make the best decisions that they possibly could for the athlete. And that was when I saw how data science can work together. You can train athletes, use information, and work in that type of collaborative environment to really develop athletes and optimize performance. And so that's when it really, stuck with me. Like, this is the type of work I want to do. Now, where this will be and what it looks like, I don't know. So I go to do my PhD at Virginia Tech. We've got no sports science. We've got strength conditioning coaches. We've got sports med. We've got all these folks that work in their areas, but no sports science, no true interconnectedness or no one that's doing that type of work. This was before there were people in administration that have some of those roles that some universities have now. And so I was fortunate enough to just, kind of connect with some strength coaches based on my previous internship experiences. A guy named Greg Warner, kind of opened his door up to me. I started working with him. I was doing, graduate assistantships, teaching, things like that on the side, or, on the academic side, doing my coursework, and then going over to athletics, coaching in his room. And then in the meanwhile, going to other coaches in athletics, knocking on their door basically and saying, hey, like, how can I help you? This is what I could do. And I mean, it was every door. I was with the tennis coach. I was in the cross country. I was over in volleyball. And then I got linked up with the football staff there, Cody Cook, Ben Hilgard, that group. And it was really there that I started formalizing kind of my work as an applied sports scientist in terms of actually, okay, this is what we're doing. They had just gotten Stat Sports, so they had just gotten an integrated microtech unit, GPS devices for the football team. I was like, okay, this is good. Going through the data, we're talking things out, helping them develop daily reports, talking through what the metrics mean, what metrics we should or should not look at. And, one thing led to another. And over time, over the years there, worked my way up, got a first paid position. I was a first paid sports scientist there. And then joined the strength staff as one of the 5 football strength coaches, director of sports science. So again, just kind of plugging away with that. And ever since then, it's just been career progressions. Basically, was at Penn State as associate director of applied health and performance science before joining the Texans. And it's just been career progression since then. But it was really that path to getting into the field that I think in different ways really shaped who I am, how I go about my work. I very much view the performance community as a family. Anyone that knows me, if they're listening to this, they've interacted with me, they know I pour into people, like anything I can do to help anyone. Even if I've never met you, if you reach out to me and you're like, hey, I need there's no questions asked. It's how can I help you? Because this field has done so much. People in this field has done so much for me. Yeah. And everything I do is rooted in, and this is my work, my personal life, everything's rooted in really one thing to me. My mission in life is to help others achieve what they aspire broadly in any context, whether that's teaching, coaching athletes. Everything I do is rooted in that. And so it's very easy to simplify your life, simplify everything you do, figure out what you're going to do and not do, and all these things, make those life decisions if that's what it's rooted in. If you're able to simplify something to really go back to one thing, and that's really what I've done, in my life. And it's like every day I set out and I'm like, that's my goal for the day. And that plays out in different ways. But very fortunate to be where I am and to be able to help others achieve what they aspire, whether that's grad students, undergrads, athletes, whoever it is. So, that's kind of some ways I've been past influences it.
All right, we got to take a second to talk about the universal speed rating, because I literally just found this out and it blew my mind. We just hit over 500,000 verified speed tests inside the USR software. 500,000. That's coaches all over the country testing, tracking, and proving athlete progress with the system. It's not just data. It's giving athletes confidence and giving coaches real proof of results. I remember running our first speed lab test back in 2019 in a closet that my uncle helped me build, now 500,000. If you're not testing speed yet, or you're doing it without a system, this is your chance to check it out. Hit the link in the description, book a free consult, and see how the USR could work in your program.
It's funny. I didn't know all of that. I knew like the military piece a little bit, but man, that's incredible, and it's unique, and it's interesting because I always have people ask me, like, when they're looking for jobs, it's like, what kind of background do I need to have? And I think the number one missed background that people have, like people that they don't really consider this as something important. It's like, have you had other jobs? Have you done other things? Have you had other life experiences outside of academia? And if you haven't, then go seek them out, because I was having this conversation with the coach last night. It was like, I only hire people that have worked service jobs. I only hire people that have worked construction. I've only hired people, and you start to see a trend. But like I would say, the things that predict success in this industry are beyond academia, life experience, other jobs, other ways to communicate and find solutions to problems. Like will probably lead to better outcomes than just going straight through bachelor's, master's, PhD. And you mentioned you're training people. You were training 60-year-old women. I've done that. You train 14-year-old boys. Still do that. So I know how it is. Now my next question is, like, when you first entered into sports science, what drew you to sports science versus traditional strength coach, head strength coach? Like, what made you want to do sports science?
That's a really good question. I think for me, I've always liked the process of answering questions using information and then trying to use that information to do something, whatever that something is, right? And for me, it was being able to take what I loved most about, I'll say, the research or the clinical setting, and what I loved most about the applied setting, the team setting also, which is something I didn't mention, but the team setting, which to me links very much to the brotherhood and the camaraderie that I had in the military, that really was my first formal family, or felt like that to me. And like, I'm able to kind of have those intersect in sports science because I'm able to create systems that help answer questions using information in service of the athletes. So creating systems that are sustainable, repeatable, adaptable, but athlete-centered. Yeah. And I'm able to apply that in my work every day. And within that team environment, that camaraderie, working with others, because that's the biggest part of a high performance unit, is the integration of different ways of thinking, different ideas, all these pieces of information, connecting the dots to do what's best for the athlete.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's really what drew me to sports science, is just that intersection piece of being able to do all the things that I love in one space.
I love that. And what was the state of sports science in the US when you got into it and you're doing your PhD? Like, where did you observe sports science, and where were the gaps that you saw in it?
I think the biggest, there were several gaps, and some of those gaps I think we're still dealing with as a field today. But I would say that I observed sports science in different ways. Obviously, at UN Ski and Snowboard, I observed some sports science there. I had observed strength conditioning coaches certainly doing sports science, even though it wasn't called that. They didn't view themselves as a sports scientist. I think the biggest gap that I saw when I was entering the field is that there wasn't truly the value wasn't really perceived to be there for people doing sports science in a way of like, that's your primary role, right? It was almost looked as like a secondary, oh, by the way, can you do this? Similar to like, okay, you're the fifth guy on a strength staff. Oh, you collect the GPS units. And then, at half the time it's, oh, what max speed did the guys run? There's no actual, like, we're going to use this information in some systematic way to help inform our practice structure, our individual management of players, anything like that. And so it was almost like an, oh, by the way, type of position or type of work. And so the coaching the athletes was viewed as separate, and also was viewed as more important. And I think as the field has grown now, as you see, like, there's been tons of positions that pop up, and now you're seeing, I think there's more value being observed in those positions. There's more value being observed in what you can do with different information streams, how you can build systems that help support all the things that are done in the weight room, on the field, at practice, outside the building. And so I think that was the biggest gap at the point of time that I was kind of transitioning and doing that work in an applied environment, was really around just the value seen in the role.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I remember when I was working for USA Rugby, and this is ahead of the 2016 Olympics. It's like 2014, and we got a couple GPS units, and we were looking at it like, what is this? What is this thing? And we put it on, and we started running around, and the only two things that we got from it were how far they ran and how fast they ran, and that was it. And we rolled for a whole Olympics off of that, and then next Olympics rolls around, and we're like, accelerations and decelerations are pretty important. So we're going to start to look at that. And then we got into speed zones, and then it just like, but before that, all we were doing was heart rate. And to be honest, like I still think heart rate has some value.
Absolutely.
Like a ton of value. And yeah, it's just evolved as we've grown. So next question is really around like, where do you see the field evolving into? Like, it kind of started where it was this very archaic thing. I ended up being a sports scientist on accident a couple of different times because that role didn't exist. And now to like where you have a Dr. Marc Lewis at the Texans, to what is the next layer and progression in this industry?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think really you're starting to see the progression to this high performance model, right? It's where you have some performance manager, performance director that's helping bring all this information together and oversee all the systems and processes that take place within a performance unit. And that matters for sports science and is an evolution for sports science for a couple of reasons, primary reasons. One of which is because I think that as that role continues to evolve, a lot of those positions are going to be coming with people coming to people with sports science backgrounds because of their ability of connecting information streams, interpreting information, thinking about all the different factors, contextual factors that need to be considered to inform those decisions. So there's going to be, I think, a continual growth, but that also provides more of a runway of development for sports scientists as they progress in their career. The second reason that's important is because it requires there to be a high level of the quality of the information collected, and that you're collecting enough information that represents all the things that you should probably be looking at. External loading, internal response to your point on heart rate, some type of internal response indicator, some type of objective measure performance task-wise of monitoring, whether that's CMJ, some isometric testing, subjective factors like wellness, things like that. And when you start talking about all the collection of all these data, it's not just about, fill this out, jump on a plate. It's about putting everything in place that allows for the highest level of the quality of the data, the management of the data, analysis, some type of analysis to identify change, to understand time series data if you're monitoring over time, and to interpret that information, visualize it. So now you're talking about skill sets that take time to develop, to be taught. Obviously, you can learn on your own, but it's raising the level of the need of the education, but also, as you can see, the growth of the positions around, okay, now we might need some people that specialize data science. We might need somebody specializing more in research and measurement or testing and measurement. We might need someone specializing as a biomechanist or a physiologist, depending on your sporting environment. So again, the growth of the field, and now you're having higher levels. I think you're going to have more of a longer runway and career progression for sports scientists. That kind of, I think also, previously, even though it wasn't titled that way, head of performance, you're basically coming from an S&C background, head strength coach. I think that is going to continually evolve to where more and more sports scientists are in those types of roles, or people that have at least served as a sports scientist in some capacity, while also potentially serving as a S&C coach or a dietitian or athletic trainer, whatever that looks like. And then with that other piece is I think you're getting more specialized, getting bigger sports science groups that hire these specialties. So getting away from you've got to wear 8 different hats. You've got to be able to know a little bit about programming, computer programming. You need to know a little bit about technology. You need to know about research methodology. You need to know about statistics. You need to know about periodization and how to coach lifts. And you need to know all these different things because you have all of these different responsibilities. So I think it's going to continually evolve to where now you have, okay, I have a staff of 2 or 3 people. Someone's going to specialize or focus in this area. Someone's going to focus in this area. I will still believe there's a lot of power in, especially early on, being a generalist before specializing.
Yeah.
However, I just think based on the requirements and how the field is going to grow, some of the hiring processes and who you're bringing into your building and building your staff out, there's going to be more specialization needed, which is going to obviously inform, grad studies for young sports scientists and what they learn and how they focus that, because there's going to be just higher levels of requirement of knowing something specific or a couple of things specifically.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. What, I guess that kind of leads into kind of understanding like what your actual role as a sports scientist entails, because like, I think that if I'm not working in a team sport right now and I'm hearing about sports science, like a lot of people visualize a guy sitting in a closet with a computer cranking numbers and that's it. And it's not that. Like I've been a couple of different places where it's like, whoa, like this is fully a part of everything. Like it's hard to even tell where it lies because it's everything. So in terms of program architecture, like how do you summarize a role like yours within a team?
That's a great question. And I think to your point, I think a lot of people, you say sports science, they think, oh, you're sitting in the closet with a computer looking at data all day. And quite honestly, that's quite the opposite. But I would say in terms of program architecture, what I look at, and this is just broad, more of a philosophical outlook, but it can be really simplified as I look at building systems, not isolated solutions. So I want systems that are simple, that can be scalable, sustainable, repeatable, and are athlete centered. And my role in what I do, as simple as possible, is I connect people to information. It's no more advanced than that at the very base level. It's just it's the intersection of data, decision making, and human behavior.
Yeah.
So, and again, like we'll get into this, or we'll probably touch on some of these when a lot of times I'm talking to young up and coming sports scientists. Our conversations always go towards, oh, what new technology, are you looking to implement, or what metrics are you looking at for this or that? And quite honestly, I view that as a lot of times, I think you're asking the wrong questions, because it's not about the methods that you look at. It's not about the force plates or the isometric testing devices or the GPS units. It's about understanding how these different methods, these different pieces, whatever they are, fit into the actual systems that you're running. What questions are you answering? What decisions are you trying to make? When does that information have to be in the stakeholders' hands? And how can we use these different pieces to make better decisions? And so, and I'll just use a basic example is, GPS, right? We think all the different metrics you can look at from external load monitoring. Well, it's not about the real external load monitoring. Okay. It's about, you're probably using that information to inform decisions around practice structure or individual load management, right? So let's think about that a little bit. When you're thinking about it, there's an athlete that comes with a host of intrinsic factors around their age, their previous injury history, the recency of that injury, what the site of that injury potentially was in relevance to their position group. So whether the demands of their actual job beyond position. Then you have other contextual factors like player value, where you are in the season, their actual career age, which may be different than their biological age. And then you have whatever they did from an external load standpoint situated in that context. Then you have how they're responding. And then hopefully you have multiple information streams that are connecting. How are they responding? What are their strength levels? What is their, if you're looking at some type of readiness measure around performance task, you're looking at what are they reporting sleep wise, or what are they reporting from like a general fatigue, all these different factors. And so overall, if you're trying to make a decision around loading, there's all these factors that have to be considered. And so you're trying to put a system in place that's going to provide information around all these things in a very efficient manner that has some type of if this, then that, some type of intervention that takes place based on the information that's organized, keeps it organized and keeps it efficient, because that's the other thing that I think sometimes gets overlooked in our environments is that when you're in a team environment, and this, you're working within generally a stressful to some level and environment, and generally with some time restriction. So you've got to have this by then. There's some type of tight turnaround with it, and there's multiple people that need to be brought into it. So your system has to be able to identify all of these different factors, have it organized in some way, and then it has to have some type of outcome based on the interaction of these factors that has some system to it, like some systematic way of thinking to it. And then you use professional nuance and understanding your experiences in conversation with others to come to some decision. But it all has to be done in a very efficient manner. And you want to set it up to where it's easily repeatable, to where every time there's some decision to be made, you're not going to the drawing board saying, okay, well, what should we do? There's something in place. Now you're going to have the ebbs and flows of certain nuance that you might slightly change a decision, but there has to be some systematic way of thinking and some outcome that you're going towards, some intervention you're going towards that you think's related to an outcome that makes it organized and clean and efficient within your environment. And so, that's kind of an example of what I would say my philosophy is when it comes to monitoring athletes.
And in just hearing that, I'm hearing two sides of it. You have a system of what happens and if then statements and, if this happens, do this. But then on the other end, you have communication. So how do you communicate that to people? Because that's the interpersonal side of it. And starting with the athlete, what does the athlete get? What does the athlete need to know in this loop, if anything?
Yeah, well, I think the athlete absolutely needs to be part of the conversation. And that goes to the very beginning in terms of educating them on what you're doing, why you're doing it, how it's going to help them. That's one of the things. So when talking about my role and what I actually do, going back to that question, it's the interpersonal piece, it's the communication piece that really is what my job is. It's the educating the athlete piece. It's all these things that connect. When I said connecting information to people, it's that connection piece, that communication piece, people broadly, whether that's an athletic trainer, whether that's a football coach, whether that's a strength coach, whether that's an athlete's parent, because I have those conversations too. We have rookies come in. I'm presenting to the rookies and their families about what we do, why we do it, and how it's going to ultimately serve their son in trying to reduce the likelihood of an injury and optimize their performance.
Yeah.
And so I'm having to communicate to a lot of different people coming from different perspectives, having different experiences about why we're doing what we're doing and how it's potentially and hopefully going to help make better decisions for their son.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key piece. So immediately when we get a new player, whether that's someone we draft or whether that's a free agent we sign, I'm trying to connect to just explain to them, who I am, right, depending on their previous experiences. They may have not worked with a sports scientist. Generally now with rookies, they will have generally come from a university that has someone doing that type of work. Sometimes with free agents, they're coming from a club. There's still NFL clubs that don't really have someone doing that type of work, especially I would say to the degree that we do that work. We ask a lot of our guys but we have incredible compliance because of the education piece.
Right.
So the athlete has to be part of that conversation. If they understand why you're doing what you're doing and how it's being used and that it's actually being used, then that's a big important piece for when it comes to an intervention. In some level, you're going to have the athlete buy in for an intervention to actually work. In most cases, it's not lab-based interventions. Like a lot of interventions, it's communication with the athlete, asking them, to do something or be part of something or help us do something for you. It's not we're giving you something and we're going to see the effect of it. It's not something like that. So, again, if it's something as simple as, an athlete's experiencing a load change, we have indicator that they may not be responding well. They may be fatigued, things like that. There's going to be emphasis on recovery, talking with them through their routine, things like that. But there's also potentially weight room intervention. There's potentially things that are done in practice. There's these other decisions that are made, which has to be done and tries to be done with them.
Right.
And so there's a significant piece to that of having the athlete buy in and making sure they're educated on things and sharing information with them.
Right.
Guys come into my office constantly. I'm texting updates for guys, and it's not max speed. Sure, guys care about how fast they run, but our guys, because of the education piece, they're asking really good questions. They understand metrics that we look at on the force plate. They understand, pieces in terms of, our hamstring monitoring, things like that, beyond just looking at asymmetry or something like that, which is cool.
Yeah.
We ask really good questions. I mean, I never forget, I got asked last off season about 1080 splits on resisted excels and, texted about how that compared to, and it's just, wow, those are, high level questions for an athlete to be at, and they are interested in that this was March, it's that's
probably Miles Bryant or somebody. Yeah. No, I mean, it's crazy because all the guys we have from the Texans will be like, all right, in the 1080, we'll give them kind of the breakdown of what it does. And they're like, yeah, we know. Or you're explaining what we're doing with the jump testing. And they're like, yeah, we know. Or you have them fill out the wellness. They're like, yeah, we do this. That's pretty cool because for me, the future of sports science is now within the athletes' ownership. They own their process and they understand their own data and they are making their own decisions, and it's easier to get and it's simpler. I did have another question just on that. So hypothetically, let's say you guys practice Wednesday, Thursday, Friday most of the time, right? So Tuesday's off, Monday's +1. So in those 3 days, if I'm an athlete and let's say I go on special teams and I do way too much running and I still got to practice and do the other pieces of it. As a sports scientist, are you communicating to the people hey, he just did way too much on special teams, we need to pull him from this? Or is it more of you're going to do the work, we're just going to adjust on the back end? What kind of philosophy do you have on that type of situation?
Well, I think ideally, you're always trying to be proactive, right? And so it's the goal is to have a plan going in and have expectations around when guys are going to get certain, okay, we're doing full speed special teams reps on punt. Okay. You go in knowing, okay, we're going to do a lot. We're going to do a full speed rep. Great. It's you should be able to expect based on who those guys are. And if you're tracking data longitudinally, you have all these other periods for those guys tracked. You know what to expect in terms of that. So you're being proactive in planning those things. You're also understanding what they did the previous week. So if they played in a game on Sunday and you're going into practice on a -4, well in advance, you've had conversations. You've planned of, okay, do we need to adjust? Okay, so let's use your example on special teams. if this, if a guy was in the game and he experienced a significant change in high velocity running volume due to special teams, we know historically in practice, based on what's being planned that week, what he might see on those given days. And so when you're intervening and you're managing load, you're trying to be proactive, in my opinion, but you're also trying to be very specific, right? It's like, where's he going to get the stressor that's going to increase his risk of injury most likely? And how can we reduce that stressor specifically? And so that's sometimes, I think, looked at as just, a guy saw an increase in load, we're going to just, limit him in practice and reduce reps. Well, all reps aren't created the same. You're trying to identify what type of stress that they experienced that disrupted homeostasis and that is subsequently setting them up for a potential injury. What type of injury? High velocity running volume's easy. Like, okay, we know the soft tissue risk, the lower body muscle location of where they might have that injury, and then we know where to look, what metric or what stressor to look for within the practice week for them to see where we can take that away or reduce that. So maybe it's like, okay, we're not going to have, that full speed rep. We're going to have, a release. Do we absolutely need that full speed rep? And that's where I think you get into the nuance too of understanding where specifically those stressors are, and then what's most valuable to the coaching staff in terms of their preparation for the game. So if it's a wide receiver and, we're talking about their high speed running volume and they're not a special teams guy, so you're trying to reduce their high speed volume, that's great. But you also have to be understanding of the fact that, hey, making sure they're running routes fast enough to where they feel like they're getting the timing right with the QB, they're being able to fit in right within the covers they're seeing, and that they feel like they're getting good flow and practice reps that are going to be done in full speed on game day is important.
Yep.
So you can't lose the nuance of making sure they're prepared and doing what they need to do to feel prepared for the game. And so there's that give and take. And that's where, to your point too, on the athlete, it's important to communicate with them, which we do as a group. And it's also important to be proactive in looking at it, because obviously there's going to be times where a guy does more in practice than he normally does. And because of that, you're being reactive in, trying to, whatever your system is, like we have things we do in terms of interventions that try to make sure that player is in position to be as fresh and as, I would say, in a position to make sure there's no red flags
Right.
for them the next day at practice. So can we get you recovered as possible, but also can we make sure subsequently we don't see any red flags before you're out on the field the next day? And so there's things that take place based on that as well.
Yeah.
And so, yes, you're going to have those cases, but, really, in my opinion, you're wanting to always be on the proactive side. And that's where the collaboration with the coaching staff, the making sure you track your data really well, understanding, all the way down, like cutting periods, annotating your data, making sure that it's cut really well to where you can go back. And when you're giving recommendations to coaches, you're being specific about the stressor, where that's going to come from, most likely based on historical data, and working with them to figure out how we can potentially modify script, get the guy the work they need to be prepared for the game, while also, hopefully anyway, and theoretically reducing the risk of injury.
Quick pause here. I want to talk about the universal speed rating. So many coaches I meet are just overwhelmed. They're running sessions, programming, dealing with parents, and trying to prove their athletes are actually getting faster. One of the reasons why we built USR was to take some of this stress off the table. One software solution to help coaches test, track, and show improvement without adding hours to your week. If you feel like you're guessing with your speed training or trying to make sense of your data, hit the link in the description. Schedule a free consult and see how the USR can help.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And it's like, I would say 80% of coaches in like let's say a sport like football, when they hear things like load management, sports science, they think that there's somebody with a computer telling them to do less and telling them to rest the players and not work. And, and it's like a fear. It's like when I remember we used to go around to high schools and put GPS on the players, and the coach is like, take that thing off. They're going to tell us to stop running. And, it's gotten a little bit better now. But yeah, I'm in the wild, wild west, by the way. That's like what we do. But what advice would you give to high school coaches that are managing loads, maybe don't have all the systems and dashboards and connection points, but they might have one or two inputs, like it might be GPS, or it might just be like time out on the field or plays or reps. But how would you manage the same situation in a youth developing window?
For sure. No, and I completely agree. A lot of times, like load management, people think doing less, and I don't view that. I don't view it that way at all. There has to be requisite stress to require recovery. You can get caught up that you're always too worried about the recovery. You forget there has to be a certain level of stress that disrupts your body to require recovery.
Right.
What we're trying to do, I look at it very much as you're trying to build adaptable and robust athletes that can ultimately handle more stress over time. And you're using information to modulate stress to build more capacity, more robustness over time. Mm-hmm. So some days this maybe do less if you're getting information or understanding that maybe they're not adapting, they're not in a place to appropriately respond to more stress. But then there are certainly times where you're using that information to increase stress because their bodies can handle it. And over time, this goes back to understanding the ebbs and flows and periodization, and actually over time, progressively overloading to increase their ability to handle stress, you're building more robustness over time. And I think ultimately too, with that, you're creating more resilient athletes, more adaptable athletes that can perform in uncertainty and that can hold up to, okay, I've got to go out here and handle a load I've never seen, but I've been loaded chronically well, and that capacity has been increased that I can handle these one-off times where I've got to handle something that I've never done before. And so that's ultimately where I think you get there. To your question about someone that doesn't have the resources, you can absolutely, and this is where you can get pen, paper, or now, electronics, or, Microsoft Forms, things like that, Google Forms, things like that. But if you're tracking stuff as simple as obviously duration, but you can grab RPE and have session RP and have a volume intensity type metric that's global.
Yeah.
There's a lot of advantages to that too, because you can do that in the weight room for strength training. You can do that on the field. There's a lot of advantages to a global measure like that can be compared across anything. And so you can have a global measure of load, if you will, from using just duration and RP. The other thing you can do with that is you can create and you can track context information. So things like environment. We know if it's more hot and humid, that load is going to be more stressful on the body than that same load done in cooler temperatures, less humidity. Simple stuff. All coaches should know that. So it's like you provide, okay, now we've got load. Now we're collecting context information, environment. Was this pads, helmet, spiders? Like what's the equipment? These other factors that are going to really situate how stressful that load is on the body. And then in terms of some type of response indicator, the wellness questionnaire that I used at Penn State, we use here at the Texas one, it's a 5-question, 1 to 5, sum out of 25. It's 5 simple constructs of general stress, general muscle soreness, general fatigue, mood state, and sleep quality. And so from that, very simple stuff, very quick for the athlete to fill out. Now you're getting some idea of how they're responding, and also some insight into behaviors that influence recovery, like sleep, and some of the other factors outside. General stress, life stress, social stress impacts athlete response. It's not isolated to physical stress. Now you're getting some insight into that, which impacts all athletes of all environments. student athletes in university, obviously they're dealing with classes, academics, they can be going through relationship things. So all these things impact their response and ultimately, whether their body impacts whether their body can handle more stress and respond favorably to that stress. And so in that example, and you could set up, depending where you're at, like I talked with a university S&C coach at a D2 school, and we built out their entire Power BI structure, which is free with their level of university licensure, to where they could collect the context information, the RP and wellness on Microsoft Forms. They house that within their Microsoft Teams channel and build a Power BI dashboard for the loading and for the wellness piece. All of that for free. They didn't spend a dime. And it's stuff they can collect on their phone, and they can have the athletes put it on their phone. And that's good information that's got research behind it, every piece of that. Yep. And it's bringing in like the simple things that we as coaches understand: environment, equipment, things like that, turf versus grass, like simple stuff that then can help you interpret that information a little better. And then you can track that over time. And I will say that there's incredible power in consistently tracking simple information over time.
Yep.
And so with that, like you can use that at high school. Everyone could track that type of information and do it consistently over time.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, one of the things, like when you talk about the dose response relationship, like what they're doing, how they're responding to what they're doing, how does it compare to what they've previously done? How does it compare within the team? And then like, that's what, like your response, you're talking about the wellness and all that, that's one level. And then I know you do some external, like neuromuscular response stuff, like with force plates.
Yeah.
And so just to double click on the force plates, like what do you trust the most for fatigue, whether it's, output strategy, whatever? What are you doing with that without giving away everything? But like, what's your general philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you hit the nail on the head, which considering you read my dissertation, then that is, yeah. So the, kind of bucketing output versus strategy. Generally I'm looking for a couple of things when I look at force plate. And I would say also as a preface to this is, basically look at 5 force plate metrics and representing, both output and strategy, 2 that represent output, 3 that represent strategy, and keep it very simple and do not introduce new metrics on one-off cases. Every piece of technology, simple metrics that represent slightly different things, and track them consistently over time and build using simple statistics to identify change in those metrics. And that's the way I view it. I think that there's power in simplicity, and you never want to lose the signal for the noise. And if you look at too much, it will create too much noise. You're not able to identify the signal. And if you're not able to identify the signal, you're not able to then be able to clearly and quickly identify when things change to help inform a decision. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do. And so even though other metrics may be sexier and you may be interested in these things, great. You can do one-off projects, things like that. But the way I look at it, and I'll tell my staff this, and if people ask my opinion, I give it and I will say it. And I will say like great projects and different things you can do, case studies you can do with other metrics. But for monitoring over time longitudinally, keep it simple and have metrics that represent different things and organized. Put it in, and we use different statistical measures based on what's appropriate to understand change and identify that change within an athlete. And so I would say metric wise, very simple and understanding. From a fatigue standpoint, I'm looking really at fatigue from the standpoint of what their output is versus their strategy. Fatigue most of the time will be manifested through an athlete's change of strategy. Generally, they will compensate to maintain whatever output, but their strategy will change to do that. The other key is like, exactly. And that's why it's important too, the statistics to identify the change. because you're not going to have the time, bandwidth to go through and check force traces of all your athletes to get that information turned around in time. So you ended up some way
scoring for that.
No. For instance, for force plate measures, we're always comparing left to left, right to right limb wise for inner limb function. Mm-hmm. And then we use effect sizes. So, and effect sizes are simple, and we're always comparing similar time frames. So game day +1 to game day +1, game day -4 to game day -4.
Yeah.
The way we're calculating the effect sizes, we're using the average value on that day. So let's say this game day +1 minus the rolling average value, minus the previous average value. So the previous game day +1 divided by a rolling within athlete standard deviation.
Yeah.
And it'd be for each limb, or if it's an output, for that output metric. And so if it's a limb measure like concentric impulse, it's that value for each limb. And then if it's like the output metric, so okay, I take RSI apart for jump height and contraction time broadly. So it's like, okay, jump height, it'd be the average of the jump height, game day +1 minus the previous game day +1 value divided by the rolling within athlete standard deviation of jump height. And the power of why we do that is because we want to quickly identify as an athlete changing outside of their norm. This is different than what I look at if I'm trying to figure out if an athlete has a limb deficit or potential tissue tolerance issue, which that's a different path I'll go down of the process of that. But this is simply, I want to know, is an athlete demonstrating fatigue, or are they potentially demonstrating an issue related to something going on with a limb, a joint, something like that? Because obviously in a collision-based sport, we're jumping athletes day after game. We're jumping athletes in the middle of the week. You're wanting to make sure you detect an athlete could have something bother them. Something could be changing on an athlete they're unaware of. It might be something that they didn't say, that when you look at it and you have a conversation with them after you see their strategy change. Your left limb changed considerably, concentric impulse today. Like I wouldn't use those terms, but checking in on them on their left limb, and they're like, actually I did take a helmet to the knee Sunday. I didn't think anything of it, but it is kind of bothered me. Great. Yep. Now we just gain time in getting you treatment in the training room, something that maybe would have popped up halfway through the week. You could then get in treatment in the meantime. Or, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, because this is something that I consistently go back to in your thesis. The decision to do a game day +1 was to detect that as early as possible, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say that the second piece is that it could be something they're unaware of. And so obviously, like when you're talking about jumping, you're talking about the hip, you're talking about the knee, you're talking about the ankle. There could be things going on with their body they're unaware of that's as simple as adjustments, things like that. But that can alter biomechanically how they're moving on the field. That could alter things. So you're wanting to make sure, again, it's just a proactive strategy. If something's changing, we're going to check it out. It may be nothing. But it's a way to identify if something's changing. More times than not, if their strategy is drastically changing, there's something going on. And it's something, either they're very fatigued or they're having something going on with one of their limbs, whether they know or not. And generally, if it's something they're not aware of, once they start getting worked on or assessed, then it's like, oh, okay, yeah, this actually feels a lot better. Or, and again, that's why it's important to establish if something's changing outside their norm. And to your point, really gaining some time on it, because the earlier in the week we're able to start working with someone on something, and this goes across any sport, the closer to game day, you're able to start working on getting them ready for the next game, whenever that is. You're going to gain that time that can 100% influence whether they're available for that game, and potentially, how they are in terms of performance. Like, are they 70%, 80%? Because you want to gain that time back, because lost time within a game week, as like it goes by fast.
Man, it does. It does. We're running out of time, and I had one more question that's probably very difficult to answer, but I'm going to say it anyway. But in football, you're going to say it depends. So just be prepared. But in football, what have you found to be something that was more stressful in the whole atmosphere? More stressful than you originally thought it would be. It could be on the field. It could be external. Like, what is the thing that you got into NFL and you're like, man, like I didn't expect this to be such a big stressor, you know?
Yeah, it does depend, but I'm going to give you two different answers. Okay, one in the NFL in particular, until you see it up close, I don't think you can truly appreciate how hard the impacts are, the collisions.
Yeah.
It's not like the way the NFL has it set up, you're not really capturing that in data, which is a different conversation due to the technology, the type of technology used to measure external load in NFL games. You're not really able to capture that in your data. And so I think that's one reason it's very important to watch the game up close and personal, see the guys and watch their expressions, look at their faces when they're coming off the field. You're understanding that's not an element you can capture in high-speed running yardage. You're not getting that in any metric you're capturing in the game, partially because of the technology used. But it's a very, very important piece in terms of understanding the wear and tear and what they experienced from a stress standpoint in the game. And until you're able to watch that up close and personal, you can't really appreciate it on TV. And you understand this, you've seen it, but it's just different. It's much different than college, and it will also see in the players' bodies after playing in a game. And in what those look like it's something you really have to see up close and personal to appreciate, and then also understand what that means in terms of the stress experience on the body that you're not going to capture in data. And the second piece I would say, and this is partially here in Houston, but it's also just something I think sometimes we forget. And I mentioned it earlier a little bit with these external load metrics, right? These high-speed running yardage, accelerations, decelerations. Environmental factors. So I was having this conversation not long ago with Adam Beard, but we were talking about it, and there's a lot of research out there looking at how heat, humidity, some of these environmental factors impact the body physiology and what that means in terms of an athlete's internal load relative to what they're experiencing externally. And you're equating measures and understanding really what that means in the toll of the body and what that means in terms of fatigue and risk of injury, I think is underappreciated in a lot of our environments, in particular in American football. And then you add potentially padded practices on top of that. So you're wearing equipment and gear in severe heat and looking at understanding how to, one, again, however you do that, we have our ways, but how you track some type of environmental load measure and look at it over time and come up with some rules and considerations for how you handle practice and balance that with turf versus grass and all these other factors. Like that is obviously has to be a consideration for how you handle that in your environment, but also just understanding how that impacts fatigue on an athlete, how that impacts the interpretation of those external load metrics. So I would say that's just two things.
Yeah.
The second one's slightly different, but I think it's relevant to your question.
No, it makes a lot of sense. And even like thinking outside of practice and thinking outside of just training, like walking around in Las Vegas is different than walking around in San Diego, and like
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Or Buffalo, New York, and the stress of being inside, or, the sun goes down earlier. Like there's so many other factors. And no, we saw that with rugby a ton. And like, we had the best environment in San Diego, perfect weather, no humidity. And then you have another group training in Texas, and it's a completely different output. And even the style of the game changed a little bit, like depending on the location. Like if you're like a New York City team, you tend to play a little bit more physical and inside, and these West Coast teams are playing more outside and doing more running. And if you look at it, like where they're training most of the year, that New York City teams are indoors in small spaces, and they get a really good inside game. And then, the West Coast teams are always outside, so more spread. So super interesting. I obsess over that in my brain, thinking about same athlete, put them in two different places, clone them, and how do they develop differently because of their environment, and not just practice, just all the things. It's fascinating. Okay, last part. You and Adam have put out a book, and I read it 3 times, and it's very good. I view it as like, for me, it was like sometimes I get lost and lose the principles, and it brought me back to the main principles. I'm not a sports scientist, but I think every coach should understand sports science principles. So the first thing I want to ask you is like, who is the book for specifically, and what kind of outcome will you get from reading the book?
Well, first of all, I appreciate that you read it 3 times, and I appreciate that you took something away from it, because I think that's something that we really appreciate, that experienced, seasoned coaches like yourself can read that book and take something away from it. But then an intern or someone that just starting their career can read it, understand, and take away from it, because that was really one of our goals. We felt applicable and valuable to anyone across the spectrum of their career. And so I really do appreciate that. It means a lot. I would say the book is to your point, it's not just for sports scientists. I've had to answer this question a lot, but we tell them, like, there's not GPS in there. There's not force plates in there. Like, we're not telling you what metrics you should look at on a force plate. This is not that type of sports science book. This is really about how you think and how you operate within an environment. I think it's for coaches, it's for sports scientists, it's for anyone that works in sport. And I would even argue it's really anyone that just thinks about high performance in whatever that environment is. There's a lot of high performers in a lot of high performing environments. So I think it's really applicable across, but especially for coaches, physical therapists, athletic trainers. I think it's applicable. And the takeaway from it, I hope one of the things it makes you do is think about how you're operating in your own space. And hopefully it's allowing you to take a step back from how you're operating in your own place. And there's questions posed in there. There's models that help you, I think, take a step back and maybe think about a certain thing in your environment and then answer those questions. It's really about how you think. It's not going to tell you, look at these metrics on GPS and look at these metrics on force plates. It's not that way at all. It's really going to help you. We hope it helps you think about how you do things in your environment, or think about how your philosophy, and then hopefully help you think on small ways to improve it, and small ways to enhance your value in your own environment, and ways to enhance how you're doing things in your own environment. Or it may be as simple as it's making you revisit things that you've previously done, or revisit problems that you've looked to solve, and think, like, a lot of times I think we have different things. We have different times in our career where we're going through, and it's the ebbs and flows of what we're working on at the time. And sometimes we can get pulled into that everyday work, right? And we sometimes get so focused on something so specific that we lose sight of the bigger picture. I know I'm guilty of that. I've done that in my career. I've had to take a step back and think about, okay, where does this one thing that I've been working on fit in the bigger picture of what I'm trying to do here? Yeah. And so for some experienced coaches, some experienced sports scientists, that might be how it helps you. But it really is about how you're thinking, and hopefully is a tool that you can use, and something you can revisit, because I think that's something else you can do with this book is you read it now, and maybe it's got you thinking about certain things, or maybe it's got you thinking about how you operate or collect data in your own environment. But then you put it on the shelf, your career progresses, you go back and revisit that book 3 years from now. I still believe, and you've read it, I still think you could probably read that and have some slightly different takeaways at that point in time based on where you are in your career, and be able to apply it to your context there.
Yeah. Yeah, no, 1,000%. And that's exactly what it did for me. And I appreciate you letting me read it. And I recommend that everybody that's in this space should read, because it gives you that foundation of thought. And like you said, like I get distracted sometimes, and you start chasing things like metrics. It's the same way, like everybody DMs me and says, "Hey, what workout should I do today?" And I'm like, I don't know, dude. Or what exercise is the best exercise for speed? I'm like, okay, like let's back up. And it's inspired me, because I do want to write a book. I'm nowhere near as smart as you, but I do want to write a book on speed. And yeah, hopefully you'll review it for me and give me some feedback. So let's do it.
Yeah, first of all, yeah, it's anything you put together is going to be elite. So I couldn't wait to read it. But yeah, not the smartest in any room. Just, try to go in and try to learn from people. And in this case, like writing this with Adam, he's one of the sharpest people that I know, one of the best human beings that I know, and one of my best friends. And so he was able to, like, he steered the ship, like he's the guy. And so yeah, really, really grateful to be able to do this with him. And
I love it.
And so, yeah, and I can't wait for when you take that on. Now I can be a reviewer, get to learn some too. And yeah, all of it. Would love it.
Yeah. One of these days. But no, I appreciate you coming on, man. I know you're busy. You guys got a lot going on right now, but we'd love to hop back on at some point. And where can everyone find you? And Twitter, Instagram, all those things.
Yeah, all my social media, at Marc T. Lewis, MarcTLEWIS, and then my website's drmarklewis.com. I'm always, like I kind of said at the beginning, I'm always willing to hop on conversations with people, any questions, anything like that. So feel free to reach out. Anything I can do for anyone that's listening. And then, I'm more than happy to try to help. And if I can, hopefully I can connect you to someone that will.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you too, Les.